Welcome back to another episode of Ceasefire Podcast. We are getting into it today, talking about social media. How do you live on social media? What a question. The question presuming that we live on social media. And I am joined by Andrew. My name's Lucas. We're doing weekly episodes, and this is the flyover. This is sort of the first part of every episode, and if you want to hear the next segment, Trenches, or the debrief, you're going to want to go to ceasefirepodcast.com, and you can select those higher levels of support to get those segments. But we always do a free segment, and this is really the greatest way, I think, to kick off every episode. So make sure you're following on all the appropriate places so you don't miss out on our content. Andrew, how are you doing, dude?
Dude, I'm chilling, man. Southern California, as of this recording, we've transitioned here into the fall and the colder weather, which equates to 60s rather than 70s or 80s.
Oh, golly.
I was just talking to someone overseas a little earlier today about seasons, and they just literally could not grasp the fact they were in Switzerland.
Yeah.
That we don't have winter. So
yeah.
Ask me, okay, so you guys get snow, right? No. I live in Orange County, California. So you have winter, right? No. That's why people live here, because we don't have seasons. It's
That's
just
right.
sunshine, and more sunshine.
Yeah.
So that's my world.
Well, I had a guy once. I was doing an episode on the gaming channel. He updated everybody on the weather in San Diego, and I was like, bro, nobody needs to know what we know what the weather is in San Diego.
We know what the weather is in San Diego.
You don't need to tell me.
Same
bro.
where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live in Kentucky. There was snow on the ground this morning.
Oh, that's cool though. That is so cool.
The first snow is honestly the worst because my kids.
Why?
I'll tell you why. My kids get super excited.
Oh, and then it melts.
They're like, can we go out and play? And I'm like, guys, it's like you'd make one snowball, and that'd be the whole yard. It'd all be gone. So we'd have to draw straws on who gets to throw the snowball. So,
yeah, it's a total tease, man. The first snow, I remember that. Growing up in Pennsylvania, it was similar. Yeah, the first snow falls, and then it just melts when it hits the ground. You're like, Then you got to wait 2 or 3 more weeks for real snow.
Well, going outside and playing is something that kids these days aren't doing that much because they're living on social media, right? That's today's topic. And
coincidentally,
yeah,
we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, and we wanted to break this up into some sections here in the flyover because we want it to be practical before we get personal. And so point 1, sort of the first section, we want to talk about the method and the madness. There's sort of a method to social media, how it works, which is sort of inherently madness laden. It's just sort of crazy. And then point 2, we want to kind of get behind the veil. Can we think critically just about how much we've integrated with social media platforms, what it does to us socially, psychologically, what it's doing culturally. But then we want to end with application. Can we actually apply wisdom to something that seems inherently foolish and sort of vain? So let's just start with point 1, though, because in my mind, whenever I look at social media, one of the things that frustrates me is its short attention spans. Clickbait gets all the love. Hate gets most engagement, right? Unkind things. Impression farms, for those of you that aren't familiar with what that means, like an impression farm or a click farm, as I call it, is when you're saying something that you know is going to get a response. So it isn't genuine. You're not even looking for genuine engagement. You're just looking to tick people off because you know it's going to get you a ton of clicks. So we have a lot of bad actors now, I feel like. We have political commentators. We even have religious figures and authors who are sort of intentionally caustic and nasty because that's what drives engagement. So the weird juxtaposition is that the method of social media is it's so accessible. Anybody can get on there and say whatever they want. You can connect to anybody in any part of the world. And yet the accessibility of it and the short attention span model of it, the content itself is so diluted now, is kind of the way I look at it. The engagement is diluted down to soundbite culture, sort of nobody really engaging in personal. It's not social anymore. It's sort of antithetical to its name. It's not social at all. So what do you think about that aspect of it? Just sort of observing from the outside and seeing the method of how it works and how it's almost maddening if you're going to engage with it successfully, you have to give into the clickbait nature of social media.
It's great question, great angle to come at this topic with. I've been working my way through this book, and I don't know how you read books, but for me, I'm always reading 10 books at once, and I rarely finish them.
Mm-hmm.
I always read enough to get the point of the author, and then I usually don't finish it unless it's a piece of fiction that's telling a story.
Right.
So this is one of many books I've been kind of working my way through over the last however many months. And it's a book called Like War. And the subtitle is The Weaponization of Social Media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Came across such a great, it's not even a quote, it's just a statement. And I'll read you this paragraph. For the internet's optimistic inventors and fiercest advocates, so sure of its capacity to bring peace and understanding, social media is a bitter pill to swallow. I thought once everybody could speak freely and exchange information and ideas, the world was automatically going to be a better place, confessed Twitter co-founder Evan Williams.
Wow.
I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And obviously we have to bring up Elon. We got to weave him into this whole conversation because everything that's going on with Twitter is so interesting, so compelling, and it's going to be fascinating to see how all of this unfolds, you know, and it's such a lightning rod for everything social media and internet related. Side note, but getting back to your question, you know, what are my thoughts on the cesspool of social media, you know, from a big picture perspective? You know, I feel like this is another example of, here is something that we didn't quantify the effects of. That, you know, MySpace, or you can go even further back beyond that to some of the smaller platforms that kind of launched the idea, you know, but really it was about MySpace, first to market, right? That was the first one that blew up and really changed our lives, or began to. And then obviously Facebook came after that. But it was another example of a technological phenomenon that there was an idea and somebody wanted to monetize it and therefore weaponize it. And it took over the world before our very eyes quickly. And nobody thought about what the consequences would be.
Yeah.
And it became so seamlessly integrated into our daily lives, and really so quickly.
Yeah.
If we're taking a step back and looking at, you know, even modern history, it's going to be decades before anyone really is able to lay out the formula, the quantification of what it's done to us as a world.
Yep.
You know, there are a ton of articles and books out there now about social media and how it affects us. But we've still only scratched the surface in terms of what it has done to the collective psyche and the individual psyche of us as people.
Yeah.
And I think the further we go in as a world, as a society, as a civilization, into really looking at it, we're just going to continue to see that its influence is insidious. And for all of the positives, and I would even argue that the authors of a lot of these platforms were not altruistic. You know, there wasn't a pure, sincere motivation, you know, behind all of it at the end of the day. We're just going to see that this thing that has become such a seamless part of our world and of our brains and of our physical reality, that we're just going to see how successfully it has divided us and how successfully it has reframed the human existence into something that is so far from what was intended. And yeah, that's a pretty dark take, but it's the reason why we're having this conversation, because the proclivity for social media to be so cesspool, to be so hate-filled, to be so ruinous to lives and so bad for us, begs that we discuss this and look at it and really break it down. And anyone listening to this, because of the title of the episode, I would have to think has some inkling of their being that wants to take a critical look at, I would like to, if possible, find a way to take this thing that has conquered the world and try to engage with it in a somewhat healthy manner. And that's what we're trying to do here is look at this thing and try to make sense of how to use it properly.
It's funny, you quoted the other co-founder, he was the former CEO, Jack Dorsey. He said the biggest issue and my biggest regret is that it became a company. And his mindset was, I don't believe, this is him speaking here, I don't believe any individual or institutions should own social media, or more generally media companies. It should be an open and verifiable protocol. Everything is a step toward that. So the idea of nobody should own this, because that's sort of when it becomes a machine. And when it's a machine, all machines are meant to run efficiently, and you refine them and you make them run better than they did the previous month, and they generate tons of money when they're appropriately designed. Whether you're using YouTube or Twitter, they've continued to iterate and make those platforms so effective. But the thing that I think gets lost in that is, if that's where you're going to place blame, as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think, why did we as humans jump in, zero caution, zero concern, and immediately sort of shape the platform in the way that we have? I don't believe that this is a sinister overlord situation where these businesses, I believe the businesses are being opportunistic, and what they're doing is they're taking advantage of our vanity. They're seeing that, these people are so vain and so willing to just sort of jump headfirst into this and give us their information, give us their preferences, what they think. But then also, human behavior is what has shaped these platforms and have made
100% human nature,
right,
as a manifestation, or behavior as a manifestation of our nature.
And it always makes me think. It always makes me think of this passage. I remember once I read this and thought, what a way to phrase it. It's in 2 Kings. It says, they went after false idols and became false. And you don't even need to be religious to see the wisdom in that, right? You can be an atheist and see that when you go after something that's promising something false, you become false yourself. And I do feel there was sort of baked into social media this promise of microfame, of look at me, look at all I've done. The classic Instagramification of taking pictures of your nice meal. And there were people posting pictures faking that they were on planes and taking these elaborate trips because they had to create this false narrative about their life. And many people have said that's all it is a highlight reel, right? You're just seeing someone's highlight reel, and it creates a negative effect on your psychology. We'll get to that in the sort of the second segment, which we're kind of transitioning into a little bit, where getting behind the veil of this, how do we think critically about this integration level that we've allowed? We've integrated with this so willingly and so full. There's a fullness to the level that we have integrated and shaped these platforms. You could be talking about Twitter, you could be talking about Facebook or Instagram. We largely have had a symbiotic relationship with the people who run the platforms because we're giving and molding it as it's going. It's sort of this emergent thing that comes out of millions of permutations of interactions of people, as well as what the platforms are seeking to do. So we have to think about, what is this doing to us socially, psychologically? What is it doing to us culturally? And that, I think, is where it gets more challenging, because it's like trying to be self-aware about your own flaws. You'll sort of defend yourself against criticism for your own flaws. And I feel like it's really difficult to think critically about something that you use so willingly.
Totally. Getting back, I want to pause on one thing about that quote that you read from Dorsey.
Right.
Where my mind went was, okay, so let's say you didn't make it into a business. Let's say it was community owned, so to speak.
Right.
Where would we end up? How would it look different? If you're, it's kind of he's scapegoating a little bit there, right?
Sure.
So what would you have? Mob rule, basically? We would end up in the same spot, I think, because of what you just mentioned. It's tapping into something so inherent in all of us, and that is vanity, ego. We want to feel like our voice matters. We want to be seen. We want as many eyes on us as possible. And this, delves into the concept of hierarchy, even in society. Whenever you have human beings, especially human beings that are organizing in any sort of group, you're going to inevitably have hierarchy, which I think is one of the most obvious manifestations of mankind's true nature. So hierarchy, as it plays out in social media, is manifested simply in what? Numbers of eyes, followers, likes, statistics. The more you can build on those numbers, the higher you are above your fellow man, right?
Yep.
And social media provides, it's like the American dream on crack, on, squared.
Yeah.
It's basically the opportunity to get ahead. It is a limitless, ceilingless opportunity for any person to elevate themselves. It is vanity mainlined in its most purest form.
Yeah.
Which is so quintessential to the human condition unredeemed. And so magnetic to each and every one of us. I don't care who you are or what your belief structure is or where you're at in terms of faith or the like. This taps into something that is so foundational to what we are as creatures that you cannot put a price tag on it. You cannot put you can't overestimate it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You hand anyone the opportunity for eyes, and you're going to see who they really are come out. Just go on Instagram, man. Look what I had this thought the other day. It would take a very, very grounded individual. I don't want to focus just on, one sex, but it would take a very grounded individual who has the opportunity to show off their God-given, bodily specs to resist going on Instagram and showing them off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And put another way, if you're a beautiful person and you have a beautiful body, you're on Instagram showing it off because you can get 1 million followers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And walk that through. What does that do to us as a civilization?
Yeah.
I digress to you, Mr. Lucas.
And this is so well timed because I just had something happen that's never happened before with any of my content. I've never had this level of viewership on anything I've ever done. So we've been short form content is taking off, right?
Yeah.
Short form content was born on Vine, and they stupidly shut it down. That platform could be on fire right now, making tons of money, and for whatever reason they shut it down. And then TikTok comes in, takes over the world basically, and YouTube it quickly adapted with what they call shorts, and those have been doing very well. I think YouTube actually very quickly has now taken back the throne of most viewed on short form. And so what we've been doing is we've been taking highlights and throwing them on all short form content mediums. And we're going to do the same thing with Ceasefire, where we've already got some highlights out
Looking
there.
forward to that. That's going to help us.
You know, cool little captions pop up as you're talking. It looks really slick. And so we've been throwing it everywhere. And obviously when a video does well, it's exciting. And a couple of things happen. I see a video do well. I've had some shorts on YouTube hit 50,000 views, 60,000. It's like, oh man. Mm-hmm. And then the next one doesn't do as well. You know, it gets like 5,000, 10,000, which is still incredible. But I'm suddenly viewing those videos as like less than
failures.
They're failures. Oh gosh. Why? Because I tasted the victory. But then recently I had the Icarus flying too close to the sun experience. I had a video on TikTok where I thought, oh my gosh, I opened up the app and I couldn't do anything. My notifications were maxed out and it was at, I don't know, 700,000 views. I was like, holy moly, I think I might have my first video ever hit 1 million. It's closing in on 4 million views. And insane. And a funny thing happened in the midst of this. It was like vanity of vanity, all is vanity. Because it's so unsatisfying when you hit that level of interaction on a particular video, because you can't interact with anyone. It's just nothing but...
too many.
It's too many. Every time I open the app, I clear my notifications, and before I can even leave, I get more. Like, more come in. And so people are pining for that. Like, they see that and they probably think, oh, that's got to be amazing. You see celebrities tweet and their videos go and they just immediately get tons of clicks and tons of interaction. But when you actually taste it, it's just ash in your mouth. There's no substance to it. There's no the social interaction's not there. Thankfully, I've been doing this long enough that psychologically I can shield myself from it, because you get lots of hate when a video is doing that well, because obviously there's people. The reason it did so well is people were hitting me from both sides. There were people that thought, this is the dumbest video ever, he's stating the obvious. And then there were other people that were like, this guy's an idiot, you know, that it doesn't look as good as he's claiming or whatever. So I was actually getting hate from both sides. That's the real art. You know, can you tick off
the hate? Sides? Tap it into the hate, man.
Yeah. Can I tick off Democrats and Republicans at the same time? That's the real recipe for interaction.
Well, that's our goal here.
Right. And so I thought to myself, wow, this is what everybody hopes happens with their video, or they're want
so hated they get millions of views.
Yeah, you want to go viral. I've never had not a single one of my pieces of content has ever hit this level of virality ever. And it's so unsatisfying. It's so cold and mechanistic. It's just a number. I look at that video and the 3.7 M, it's honestly no different than when it says 1,000 to me, because it's literally just a monsoon of shallow, redundant interactions that don't mean anything fundamentally. All those people have already forgotten about me. They've already moved on to some other video. Well, they'll give a micro response to it, a like, a comment, you suck, or you're ugly, whatever people want to say. And it's just empty, and yet we're all pining for it at the same time. Everybody wants that. They want to have the millions of followers and likes, and they want to have those levels of interactions. But I'm here to tell you, when it happens and when you get it, it's nothing. It's like trying to hold sand in your hand. It just doesn't work. There's nothing satisfying about it. There's nothing meaningful or substantive. And I actually felt it chiseling away at my desire to even open the app. It's like, I don't even want to open it, because there's no longer that sense of, oh, did a video do well? Oh, how's that video doing? It's that one video just sort of overshadows everything. And so you got to think socially, psychologically, and culturally, if we're all pining for that, and then once people do get there, if they have the same feeling that I had, then what's next? Despair. I believe despair awaits anybody living on social media in this way. So how do you get out of that?
There are so many parallels to that phenomenon in the quote unquote real world as well. I always think about this. You know, what's the biggest stage in our society. I would argue that's probably like the Super Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like our biggest sport is football, American football, NFL. And think about these guys that play the sport, and it's a very short-lived time because of the violent nature of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they can only play it for a few years. I think the average career span for an NFL athlete is between 3 and 4 years. So this is very short period of time that they're on this massive stage. And you hear about, I've read many stories because I'm interested in these things, and I'll draw a parallel here to my own experience. Never played professional football, obviously, but I have a couple things in common with this sort of story. So you read about these guys who experience this level of adrenaline and this level of attention and this level of pampering and just this unreal bubble world that these professional athletes on the highest level live in for this short period of time, the grandest stage. And you think of the guys that play it at the highest level,
Mm-hmm.
The all pros, the Super Bowl MVPs, the Tom Brady's or whoever. And he's an anomaly because he's played for so many years. But, the average player, it gets this very short time in the sun, in the limelight. And I read these stories about these guys going into these deep depressions after they have to retire. And they're still young, they're 32 years old, 28 years old, 34 years old, if they play for a long time. And they go, now what? And I just imagine these guys, the volume being turned down on life after that.
Yeah.
And how empty that must feel afterwards. Yeah, and the parallel in my world, there was a moment when my band was quite large. Maybe not in the like pop sense, but to the point where I could walk out and go in public, and more often than not, if I went to the grocery store or I went out or whatever, there, more often than not, there would be somebody around that either knows the band or recognizes me, And there was a finite period of time for a few years where it was like, man, I'm a rock star. You know what I mean? Like, and you start, you believe that and you feel a certain way. And I lived in a bubble, of being a quote unquote rock star. It's still my job to play music and to perform and to write music, and people definitely are still engaged with it. But it's not like that, where it was almost, we were just like an it band, at that moment. And it took me a long time to adjust to not being on that mountaintop, because there was a marked period of time where I was there, and then a fairly short period of time later, I was not there.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling is not one that I would wish on people. We're talking about the same things here.
Yeah.
We're talking, being elevated above your fellow man in some form and experiencing that rush of, I'm up there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot to that.
The challenge here, I want to move to application. So we've kind of talked about the method and the madness of the platforms, and then thinking critically about what it's doing to you and others, and giving anecdotal evidence of, look, man, it's not that great. It just isn't. You get that level of viewership. I mean, I, even in the streaming world, have been in very successful streaming environments and main stages, and had thousands of people watching at once, and it gets to that point where you can't even think about that because it'll make you crazy. And then if I'm going to try to have application, thinking wisely about using these platforms, the question is, how do you apply wisdom to a foolish system? Like, how do you approach these systems and these structures that are there is foolishness baked into it?
Exploitation of our weaknesses, exploitation of our egos, exploitation of our vanities.
Right.
You know
Is it antithetical to the system itself? Is it ironically foolish to try to be wise if the systems are going to reject wisdom, if they're going to reject thoughtful interaction. And another example I would give is there was a particular topic recently about Call of Duty that I was covering. And all of my short form content got hate and disagreement and criticism. And then I had long form versions of the content on a completely different channel, and it got nothing but support and thoughtful comments. And I thought that was so interesting. Because it was almost as if the short form content, the highlight, was geared toward and getting viewed by those who aren't thinking critically. They're just immediately going to hate and unkind comments. And then the longer form content is obviously going to appeal to people looking for something that's more thought out and more long-winded and structured differently. It's like the difference between listening to a podcast and watching, just scrolling through 10-second funny clips. And it made me wonder if the degradation and the devolution of humankind can be seen in that you can see the effect it's having on people. They're not thinking critically. That's their blow off steam platform. They're just scrolling through, and if something ticks them off, they leave a mean comment. If they think something's awesome, they leave like a hell yeah, right? So it almost feels foolish to attempt to apply wisdom to the platforms, because they're going to reject it. If I tried to put long form, thoughtful content on these short form platforms, they would fundamentally reject them. They wouldn't do well. We have found that the way that short form content gets the most clicks and the most views is you need
provocation.
Yeah, you need the first 5 seconds to provoke them to keep watching. So there's an art form to the first 5 seconds of a video being some sort of a statement or some sort of a call to action, or it creates this curiosity in the person. And so the application here, I don't have a good answer. We've said that many times, like we don't have the answers here. And we were joking before, because I'm a big fan of wisdom literature. I've been reading through some of the wisdom aspects of the Bible, thinking like, can you apply the wisdom of the Proverbs to today? Like, is that possible, or is it going to feel out of step or archaic and outdated? And the one verse that always makes me laugh is Proverbs 4:7 says, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. That's the beginning. And whatever you get insight. And I think the challenge is that if you're going to say the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom, you have to start somewhere else. I don't think you can start on these platforms. You need to have a lens. You need to have a starting position before you come to the platform. The platforms will not give you wisdom. They're not designed for that. They're designed to feed you the shortest amount of content so that you can consume as much of it as possible and move on to the next.
Stay.
Right. So they're antithetical to wisdom. So if you are going to get anything, get insight, and if the beginning of wisdom is just to get wisdom, you need to go where it is. You can't go to these places, these click farms, these clickbaits, these short form videos and blogs. They are structured in such a foolish way that you have to come to the platform with a wise outlook first. And even then, does that mean we shouldn't use the platforms? Does that mean we should disengage? Or should we do the best we can to engage? I don't know. I don't have the answers. Maybe you do. What's the answer, Andrew?
Oh, no pressure.
Yeah.
I have two pieces of advice that help me. And we can go deeper into this in the next segment. Obviously, we're going to personalize this discussion a little bit more and frame this in terms of how we use it for business and work and personal interaction. But the number one guiding principle, I think, that would change the world as we know it, if just enough people did this, would be this. Talk to people online as if you're talking to them in person.
Mm-hmm.
I know that requires a level of discipline and self-control that many don't desire to pursue or have. But I promise if you did that, it will change the world. I actually do this. And I think it's just because of my generation and age. I was around on Earth long enough before the advent of social media that it was ingrained in me to have normal human physical interactions.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. Yeah, I get haters on Twitter sometimes, and I get haters on Facebook sometimes who, are just doing what people do, and they say rude stuff. And my response is always the same. Can I take you to coffee? Would you like to meet up? Where do you live? I would like to meet you in person so that we can discuss this further. Those people never respond.
Sure.
Never in a million years, because no one would ever say those things to someone's face, let alone my face. Whatever that thing is. You're an idiot. Whatever it is, I hate you. Right?
Yeah.
But think about it. If you just spoke to people on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever, pick the platform, as if they were real people and you were talking to them in real life, how much would that change the world? It would probably force all of the media companies to go broke, all the tech companies, because they feed off the hatred and the polarization, which is why we're doing this, which is to shine a light on it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is far more difficult, in my opinion. Set a limit on the amount of time that you're scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself screen time limits per day. And I will be the first to admit that this is a hard thing, because once I get on Instagram specifically, it's just feeding me stuff that I like, that I want to see, whether that's like healthy food recipes or, vinyl records that I could buy or whatever, man, whatever I'm into. It's really hard to get off of that thing because you're just going and it just keeps giving you more, But what if you just set a 10-minute time limit, or a daily time limit of 30 minutes or whatever that number is that keeps it a minuscule or minor part of your day, so that you're not losing an hour here, an hour there. You're laying in bed an extra 45 minutes just scrolling. Those are the two pieces of practical, insight that I would have to offer if you're going to actually try to have a healthier interaction with social media and therefore the people behind social media on the platforms. Those are two things that anybody could do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be a happier person on the other side of enacting that in your life.
As you were,
I hate the word happy, but
right.
You know what I'm saying?
As you were saying that, it made me think that it's one of the few activities where if somebody pressed pause on your life in that moment and said, what are you doing right now? You wouldn't be able to really quantify it because you don't know what you're doing. You don't have a specific goal. You're just scrolling, looking for something funny or whatever.
Devolving into the void.
Right? Think of all the things you do throughout the day. If someone pressed pause, like, what are you doing right now? I'm getting ready for work. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm making breakfast. I'm driving to work. Well, what are you doing at work? I'm reading emails. I'm processing transactions. There's so much purpose behind all of those little mundane things. This is maybe encouraging to people who have jobs that might feel repetitious and mundane and tedious, and maybe they feel menial. There's so much more purpose in the cashier at Target or the drive-through clerk at McDonald's. There's so much more purpose throughout their day and their actions than what most of us are doing on social media. No one can actually say, what are you doing right now? I mean, you may be able to say, well, I'm debating with somebody. Well, why? What's the purpose of that? Are you going to change their mind? Or I'm leaving a hateful comment, or I'm posting a picture of my really fancy lunch. Why? What's the purpose behind that? It's so, you wouldn't be able to quantify it. I hate doing it. I had a really great birthday recently. We're recording this, middle of November, and my birthday is November the 9th, and Happy
birthday.
Thank you. That's not why I said this. I don't want people to leave happy.
I already told you happy birthday when you told me before.
You did, but I don't want the happy birthday comments on the episode, but we're going to get them anyway.
You're going to get them anyways. You blew it.
And this episode won't be published until months later. But the thing was, I caught myself wanting to take a picture of all the things my family had gotten me and post it. Mm-hmm. And I caught myself, I was like, why? Why do I need to do that? I don't need external affirmation from other people. I just got all the affirmation I need. Thoughtful cards from my kiddos and my wife. Very thoughtful and meaningful gifts that they put thought into. They knew I was going to enjoy them. It was like, that's the affirmation that I need. I don't need likes and public accolades because I got cool stuff for my birthday. So I didn't do it. And I think the antidote to that, I need affirmation from these other people, from the public and from the likes, is you need true and meaningful affirmation from something that's far greater than what you're going to get on these platforms. I think we're going to get into that in the trenches because we want to personalize this. We want to kind of maybe even strategize and theologize it. Like, what exactly is the antidote to allow you to engage on these platforms in a healthy way? And I don't know. That example just kind of hit me. Is, what are you doing? Why would you post that? Why are you on there? Why are you scrolling? Why are you posting and debating the things that you are? And if you can't give good answers to those things, it might be a fruitless endeavor. So let's head to the trenches unless you have any final thoughts.
My final thought is, let's head to the trenches.
There it is. So if you're listening and you made it this far, you may be watching this on YouTube. You may be watching or listening on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify. You may be on Patreon. If you're on any of those platforms, okay, we have other segments that do cost, the trenches and the debrief. Just go to ceasefirepodcast.com and you can engage with those there. And that means we'll see you on the other side of the trenches and the debrief if you're one of those people. If not, do all the things to help this video or this episode get seen. Share it, like it, and the rest. All right, we'll see you.